Welcome to another video for WinBidPro version 16. In this one I'd like to talk about the splice feature and specifically horizontal splices. So what we're going to do is look at this elevation here. There's 12 panels. Right now it's only 240 inches wide, so it's under the length of a stock length. And it's a can system, so it's got a continuous head and sill. And let's change it to something that's greater than a stock length, like 330 inches width. So what's going to happen is this prompt will come up, this window will come up asking you if you want to automatically splice those pieces that need to be spliced because they're too short to fill that width. And also whether you want to do that later. So it can automatically splice, or you can kind of add the splices yourself later. And then you can also tell it to remember this setting for this job and then for any new job from now on. So if I just want to click this one and say automatically splice, we'll know that there's a splice because we can see it in the drawing now. So it's kind of roughly in the middle of this second to last panel, and it's spliced both the top and bottom. And we will see, if we go to the Splices tab, we'll see that there's an entry in here that when it automatically spliced, it created this entry at 286 inches. So it's 286 inches because there's a trim value, it's called a cleanup cut for the part. So this is another little bonus piece of information. If we go to the finishes under catalogs, we'll notice here that for black, the black finish color for this particular catalog, we're using Oldcastle now, we have it set just in our system so that there's a 1.5 inch cleanup cut both at the start and end of a stock length. So that's actually taking 3 inches off of the usable amount of a stock length. So it was probably a 289 stock length in the parts list, but it's only 286 is usable, which is exactly why there's a 286 splice point. So that's what that means. So now let's show you what happens when you add a splice manually. So if I click to add a splice manually, it's going to show me all these little icons, triangles, and squares. So what you'll see is the triangle is basically mid-panel, so it's the center point of each panel. There's a center point of each vertical, and then there's the beginning and end of each vertical in squares. So these are called snap points, where I can just click and start the point of a slice. So there's also these different commands over here on the left. Since we're working with horizontal splices right now, since our elevation is that wide, if it was taller, then we could actually work with vertical splices too, but this is only 120 inches. I forget how tall it is, but it's less than a stock length. So I'm going to click Receptors, Subsill. So this is basically for head receptor, sill receptor, and subsills, or sill flashing. So whenever I point, so now I can manually add a splice is what we're doing now. So we've automatically created one. We saw it was at 286, but let's just say I want to add one manually for the fun of it. All I have to do is click on one of these little icons and it turns green. So then it tells me which one I clicked on here. So I can actually add multiple splices. I could click in the middle of panel 7 too. And it gives me that list. So that's one way to add splices. You're using these little icons, you're clicking on them, and it's creating a list of those positions that you've clicked on. Another way, let's go ahead and add that, and we'll see when we hit done. So we've got one more entry in this grid here, and it's telling us which things we've added. The next way to do it is to hit add, and then check this little box that says measured splice. So measured splice, this basically means a location that I can type in. And I can type in something like, 48 inches if I want. And basically it's going to show me these little lines, both top and bottom, like where that point is, and I could even say it's 180 inches. So you can see how it's moving that point along to what the value that I've typed in. So 240.5, you know, so we're giving you an idea where that is. Now, if you really want to, if you don't want to use those little snap icons and you do want to enter your own value, sometimes it's handy to use this little measure tool. So this little tape measure icon up here, if I click that and it gives me this red text, now it's at a point where I can actually click on something. So to measure something, I need a start and end point, right? So I'm going to come over here, and what I'm going to do now is click the left corner, and I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to measure. Let's say I want it to be, you know, somewhere. It's going to give me these kind of the same snap points we saw on that other screen that had all the different triangles and squares. But if I go to the midpoint of panel 6, I'm measuring that to be 151 and 3/30 seconds, right? So I could say if I want my snap point to be in here, or even the center of this one, it's 164 3/4. So that's the value that I can type in here. 164.75. I can hit add, and then I can hit done, and now I've manually added that splice too. So those are the basic ways that you can add horizontal splices. It works very much the same for vertical splices too, but for horizontal splices, especially when you have horizontal material in an elevation, it's going to show you a ton of those little icons. So looks a little overwhelming at first, but that's kind of how it works. And again, you can always add them just by putting in a measurement if you wanted to. But again, if I uncheck that box, then it shows me all those little icons. But if it is checked, you should just be able to put a dimension in. But if you have to, you can use that little measurement tool too. And that tool comes in handy for a lot of things, but that's how it works. So yeah, that's pretty much it for horizontal splices. Now keep in mind that you can select different types of horizontal splices here, like if you want horizontal pressure plates and face covers to be spliced, I would click this. But since there aren't any horizontals, it's not going to show. Well, I guess you could do face covers on the receptors too, if there were any. But and then there's basic head and sill, head, sill, and face caps, and it's always going to do like a back member if there is a face cap. And then what else? Oh, and then you'll notice for if we click verticals, if there were splices, we can even add splices if it's shorter than a stock length. That doesn't matter. So it's selecting all of them, and that's where we can say we want none selected, and then we can actually just click on that. But those are vertical splices, just to mix it up a little. But basically, yeah, you're telling it what type of splice material you want, or what components you want spliced over here, and then you can actually select and unselect variations of that component. So that's how all that works. And remember that you can always go in and see the splices because they'll show up on the drawing. So that's about it for splicing, except I guess there's one other thing where if we edit a framing system and there's splice hardware, then we can go to, let's say, head receptor and splices. And if we actually have to add splice hardware to, if we want whatever couplers or whatever's needed for the splice, we can add the part numbers here, or we can even browse the parts list and find the splice pieces. And let's say we need to add that. It's going to know that each splice requires that part, and then we can actually configure the gaps as well. So if we know that the joint gap needs to be 1/2 inch, or if it's 3/8 or whatever it is, I'm actually able to configure that, and the the offset for the face cover versus the back member, and all that can be configured in splice configurations. So if you do want to get down to the nitty-gritty and have the parts and the offset, you know, for all of the horizontal splices, this is where you would do it. And once you save OK, it would show up. And I'll have another video that talks about these red exclamation marks for these part numbers, but those basically mean they're obsolete. And we're showing them to you just to show you that there's a problem with the part number and it needs to be substituted for a current part number. So that's just a tip on what's going on there. And I think that's it for now. Thanks.